Welcome to Medical Spa Mastermind. I'm your host, Cathy Christensen, and I'm very honored today to have the amazing CEO of Growth99 with me on Medical Spa Mastermind, Rob Pickell. Rob, welcome to the podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. Very happy to be here, and thanks for hosting me.
Absolutely. So I had the opportunity probably about 9 months ago or so. Rob and I had the chance to kind of connect, and poor Rob, I grilled him on a million different things. Growth99, as most of you in the industry know, Growth99 has been in the industry for a while, but it changed hands about 2 years ago. And if you've been in the industry a while, you know that when that happens, priorities shift and things just change with the company. So I knew Cameron Hemphill, who was the former owner and kind of the visionary behind the first iteration of Growth99. So at that time, when Rob reached out to me, we actually are collaborating. I'm a thought leader for Growth99. Poor Rob, he got the grill. I asked him everything they're doing to grow and change Growth99 to what it is today, and really found Rob to be incredibly insightful. Rob, tell us a little bit more about, I know you're a relative newbie to this industry, but you've done some amazing things. Rob has been in the software as a service industry for quite a while. He's worked for Verizon Wireless, Stamps.com, and now you're in our crazy little corner of the world. So can you tell us a little bit more about, how you're finding it and kind of where things are at with you right now?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for asking. So, as you just alluded to, I've spent really my whole career in technology and services, focused on B2B. Probably most notably, I've been part of building $300 million revenue plus software as a service businesses focused on B2B verticals. The one that's most relevant to this conversation is a company called Cario, now rebranded as Tabra. And it's the largest US-based software application for independent medical practices, kind of in the traditional medical space, not in the cash-based space. And we built that business up over 7 years by kind of starting with one aspect of the tech stack and then kind of extending and broadening it over time, and learned a ton about health tech and really what healthcare entrepreneurs need from technology and services with that experience. And so when this opportunity came along, in many ways it was the perfect kind of intersection, if you will, of a career spent focused on marketing and business growth, with deep domain expertise in healthcare, kind of applied in an adjacency. I mean, it's not totally different. There's similarities and differences, and that was super attractive to me and interesting. And I would say, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, when I joined 2 years ago, I think the market's changed somewhat. Supporting growth was something that was obviously of interest and important to med spas and their owners. But I think in the last 24 months, it's kind of gone from important to mission critical. And if you're, if you're owning or managing a med spa and, your growth plan isn't on the, top 3 most critical things that you're focused on, there's probably something, missing in that focus. And so I think, we're even, more directly over the bullseye now in terms of, what we do. And at Growth99, we're really focused on providing an integrated, comprehensive digital growth platform, for med spas and related businesses, and very much focused on doing that at a very aggressive price point, and over time doing it in a way that we take on as much of the lift as possible, from our clients, because our basic proposition is you're in the business because of your expertise in your craft, not because you want to manage all the other business aspects of your practice. And so while you need to have a grounding there, if you can find partners to, take on some of that burden, that's clearly a success factor. And so that's really what we're striving to do over time.
Yeah. So when you say kind of your growth mindedness, talk to me a little bit more about what a business owner should be looking for in a software. I have been in this industry for quite some time, and I can tell you the most common question that I get asked is software questions and which is the best
Yeah.
and which isn't and why. There's not a clear answer. There's never been one. In my opinion, and I've talked to a number of people, it really does depend on your need and your want. But how would someone go about trying to find the software that's the right fit for them? And what does that mean? Um,
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think a lot of people see it in a day-to-day aspect, but I know Growth99 is more focused on strategy um, and kind of trajectory towards growth as opposed to just like thriving instead of just surviving. So, talk to me about that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think just honing in on the specific question around basically making decisions around how to apply technology in your business. I think that's probably bigger than software now. If you include AI as a different
Yes.
type of technology as well, the key thing to remember is software exists to help you do something that's well defined, where there's focus, there's
Mm,
clear objectives around outcomes, there's ownership, there's process, and there's some degree of maturity in those things, or strong vision around what you want those things to look like. And
uh-huh.
in that context, you're evaluating whether there's technology that can help you achieve those things, right? And I'll draw
Right.
kind of a little bit of an indirect analogy. Execution is about people, process, and systems. Let's talk about the people part of it first. You wouldn't hire someone without a totally clear definition around what it is that you want them to do and what type of skills and experience they need to be able to map into that position, right? It seems like kind of
Mm-hmm.
silly to even bring that up,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say in our space, it might be fair to say most practices are quote unquote, hiring the software, making a software decision without those questions answered.
Ah,
And I think if you looked at it in terms of hiring, you'd say that's absolutely, a really bad way to go about managing your business. Yet it's almost a, common approach on the software side of things. And you just mentioned this, but I see that all the time as well. Like you go into a Facebook group, and every day it's the question will be like who what's the best EHR, as an example,
yes.
and
Yes.
then 50 people will respond and kind of lightly argue with each other and promote what they're using, or actually maybe highlight that they don't like what they're using. Almost never is there any discussion whatsoever around like, what are your requirements, tell us more about your practice, what are you solving for, what's most important. And it's like absolutely impossible to make a smart software decision without clarifying those things, right?
Yes.
And I think if you look, if let's take EHRs as an example, in those threads, again, there's people that love what they have. They probably did that or maybe got lucky. There's people that aren't happy with what they have. In many cases, having built software businesses, I would posit that those software applications are actually quite good, but not necessarily good in the scenario that particular user is trying to use it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you kind of look at that and you have to ask yourself, is the information that's coming back from that query really actionable in any way? And I would argue that it's not. And I think that so many investment mistakes have been made by just skipping really the kind of the due diligence to clarify what it is that you're trying to accomplish, develop requirements, and then go out. And I think if you wanted to ask that question, it's like, hey, this is what's most important to me. I have these types of services in this market on this side. I want to do these types of things. If that sounds like you and you're happy with what you're using, tell me more, right? And I think you're
Right.
immediately going to get much more effective feedback that's going to allow you to make a really good decision about what to buy.
Yeah, no, I love that because I think, well, the alignment of expectations in any instance in a business is critical. I can and do speak about this quite a bit, but it's interesting because I think, and this is just an assumption, but I think that software processes tech for a lot of people in this industry is like it's so outside of what they're comfortable with that they are not even sure how to ask the right questions to get there. And they think if I can
Yeah,
just plug this in, it's going to fix all my problems. And then when it doesn't, it's like, why isn't it fixing this problem? So I love what you're saying. Like, sit down and define why you are looking for software, what it's supposed to help you with, what you need help with, as opposed to
right.
just thinking everything is the same and like just crossing your fingers. It's software is very much a garbage in, garbage out type of situation.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I mean, there in almost all instances, other than a brand new startup, you're whatever the areas that you're trying to address, you're doing something today, right? Like you have a process, some
Yes.
aspect of it is
Yes.
probably working, other elements not. That's where you start from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even, I think even in the buying process, I mean, we talk about that a lot. No one that we deal with prospects or clients have expertise in buying what we sell. And
Mm-hmm.
like you have to go into the conversation recognizing that and helping, in a trustworthy way, guide the conversation in a way that's going to be productive for the person looking and, as well as for us. And I think, again, you can have better conversations with companies by being really clear, like, this is what I'm trying to do, right? And
Yes.
then that's going to even drive the conversation around demos or features and functionality. um, Most vendors miss that as well, right? Like you get on a demo call and they start going end to end, like they're showing you a
Yes.
car, and
Yes.
people's eyes glaze over in 5 minutes, and it's a wasted hour. The alternative is like, hey, this is the thing that I'm struggling with,
Mm-hmm.
and here, or maybe the three or four things, and I want to spend all of our time really diving into those things and understanding how you would help me solve them, right? Totally different conversation.
Right. Well, and how do you handle an industry like ours, which for many, like most accounts, it's growing, it's evolving and changing. You can have a very different experience from one year to the next, definitely from 1 year to 3 years, as far as needs. How do you handle that? And how do you recommend that business owners handle that with their software company to see that, to make sure it's still a good fit for their growth or their place in the industry as they grow?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and I think a challenging one, which is why you asked it. A couple things I would highlight that are related to that. First of all, I think it's pretty common understanding that in any industry with any type of application, there's often a pretty big difference between what people actually use and what the application can do. Right?
Yes.
I'm sure
Like
you've seen that all the
Excel.
time.
I mean,
Yeah,
listen, I
yeah,
use like maybe 5% of Excel. I know this.
yeah, and I think if you reflect on the reasons why, I would highlight two primary ones, having done this for a long time. The first one is on the vendor side for sure. And what happens as a software company, you want to listen to all of your users. You tend to listen more to your heavy users. Like, just that's just the way it works.
Uh-huh.
Companies have user groups and advisory panels, and quite frankly, those aren't necessarily representative of your average user or your next new user. And they're the most demanding.
Mm-hmm.
They have the most demanding
Mm-hmm.
expectations, and they drive vendors to build more and more and more stuff that less
Mm-hmm.
and less or fewer and fewer people are actually using. And it creates
Mm-hmm.
kind of something we talk about as software bloat. And a lot of times applications kind of this is the opposite of what you were asking about, but they kind of move beyond the core user need because of this
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon. And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty typical. Some of them it just drifts that way. Others, it's an express strategy because they want to move up market over time, so they're kind of chasing that next segment up, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So that's absolutely a piece of it. I think for the reasons we already talked about, I would say a bigger challenge than growing out of software is picking something that is too complex for what you need. That is also
Mm.
like the 10 or 20% of using the feature set. Probably not the right application for you.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's going to be confusing, it's going to be harder to support. So I would say we probably see less practices really just growing beyond their software versus never growing into it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, I mean, no one has a perfect crystal ball, but I think if you have aspirations around how you want your practice to grow, those are things that you can explore in a conversation with a vendor, right? So you're exploring those use cases and then starting to think about, how it might scale if I go from, one provider to four, or, multiple people in the front office, or whatever the use case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Then the vendor can talk about, how much they fit that type of situation or not. And
Yeah.
again, I would generally be less worried though about timing out, and more worried about the just getting something that's over engineered, and that drives that that 10% figure in a bigger way, because it's just too confusing to people, and you put a lot of money into something where you're not going to get the return in your business that you're looking for.
Yeah.
We will be right back after these messages.
This episode is sponsored by Growth99, the med spa industry's leading digital marketing platform. Growth99 has helped over 1,000 aesthetic and elective wellness practices grow through powerful digital marketing. Leading practices trust Growth99 for services including marketing automation, beautiful websites, paid media, and SEO. Visit www.growth99.com today to learn more, or click the link in our show notes.
And now, back to our episode.
Well, when you talk about crystal balls, it makes me think of, we don't have one of those, but we do have research, which is our pretty much all that we can do at this point. But tell me, I know Growth99 has a 2026 benchmark research report. Talk to me about your key findings and what you found in that report. And
thanks for
I'm
flagging
excited.
that. So we've done this is something I've done in other industries and brought into the business. I think in general, I want to be within a company that's just like what you said at the beginning, is providing thought leadership and expertise, and helping the market mature and grow and be successful. So last year we did our first benchmarking report. So this is our second one, so we can start to see how the trends are really changing. And this year was, I would say, pretty surprising to us. And we saw a lot of big changes that are not typical, I would say, year over year, and doing this for a long time. And I would, there's a lot of, kind of more nuanced examples of that. But I would say that, kind of the big theme that we're really highlighting, and people have talked about this for the last couple of years, is that the data show that there really is this inflection point where the industry is kind of growing from being just a very classic growth industry, where the demand is growing, it's robust, it's generally outpacing supply, and I think that's what's made this industry so interesting for so many years, and why there's been so much success within it. I think people have been reporting on, hey, is the rate of practice growth starting to outstrip the rate of, patient demand growth? And I think we saw indications of that in this year's survey. And the way we've been framing that is, it's still a growth market, but it's more of a competitive growth market now, where, it actually was a viable strategy 3 or 4 years ago. Opening a practice is your growth strategy, right? And I think the data showed this year, we call it the great divide between, there's many practices still thriving and growing, and have very bright prospects, from those that maybe are finding it a little bit more difficult to be successful. And it's really this competitive growth dynamic that's driving that, and you can start to see the drivers of that really clearly in the data. And at the highest level, I would say I'd probably distill it down in this way. most entrepreneurs that get into the space, they do it based on, their craft, their training, their expertise, and their just passion for wanting to be
Mm-hmm.
in the industry. That's kind of a table stake, right?
Uh-huh.
In the data now, that's basically not enough anymore. Like, that's not enough to allow you to stand out apart from all of your competition. And the practices that are really starting to pull ahead are coupling that with just more of a kind of a grounded business focus. And that means a lot of different
Uh-huh.
things, but kind of having the mindset that to be successful, I need to be, great at what I was trained to do. And I need to be great as an entrepreneur, which, comes with a lot of other demands and needs. And
Yes.
if you can't do both of those, it's going to be really hard to pull ahead. And the data in so many different points within the benchmarking survey that, that comes across again and again and again. And I
Uh-huh.
think one aspect of that kind of, more anchored in really what I would view as marketing strategy, a basic principle that I would put in, kind of that entrepreneurial business side of things, is really being thoughtful about, who am I going after? What type of segments do I want to serve, and why?
Mm-hmm.
Are those representative in enough volume in my market? And then based on that, how am I really going to be different than, the six other practices, within a half mile of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I talk about that a lot because I've, as I said at the beginning, I've spent my entire career in marketing, and that's the first most critical decision point in marketing. It's really the principle, which is probably 50 years old, is called
Mm-hmm.
segment, target, position, right? So segment your market, decide who you're going after, and position your business for success. And if you're, again, probably didn't matter a lot a few years ago, if you're not doing that now,
Uh-huh.
there's absolutely no way, other than in, very niche markets, that, you're going to start to pull ahead of the competition. There's just too much of it. And by doing that, by not differentiating, and we saw this in the data, you're basically kind of, commoditizing yourself and the industry as well. And if I recall the numbers correctly, I think it was 86% of respondents reported selling the same basic services in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other, kind of the corresponding question was, around the greatest challenges, and 77%, not surprisingly, reported being challenged with their ability to stand, apart from their competition. Which, when you look at those things, you're like, well, no surprise, right?
Right, right.
You're selling the same stuff, providing the same services, talking about your practice in almost the identical way. Of course, you're going to be challenged with differentiation. And, again, 3 or 4 years ago, it didn't matter because the practice that looked
Mm-hmm.
just like you really wasn't in your direct geography.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's someone on, literally on every corner, right?
Right.
So that was, again and again, as you go through the data, I think the thing that's really, really jumping out this year, and I think it's we've been spending a lot of time just year to date, just trying to find all the ways to really, like, get on a soapbox and just make people recognize the criticality of addressing these core issues within your business, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's only going to get more important and harder
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that you're not really thinking through these issues, right? And I'm sure you engage with practices on these types of things all the time, just given your
Yeah.
background.
I mean, absolutely. And it's very interesting about, so this is a very young industry. The one thing about this industry that's, I believe we've got, actually, there are several things I really think we have going for us. One, it's generational. So
Mm-hmm.
as our, the upcoming generations get more, and there's indications they are quite comfortable with these types of services, that will
Yep.
continue to feed into the need for the service. The other thing is there are so many different ways to succeed in this industry, but I
Yep.
think you're absolutely right. A lot of people are doing the kind of rinse and repeat version, and not necessarily, the riches are in the niches. I've heard that a million times, but the truth of the
Yep.
matter is, if you are identical from the same business that's across the street, then all you have to differentiate yourself on is price. That's
Yep.
it. And that's not where you want to be. So knowing that, and knowing that we're a relatively young industry, Rob, is this a normal part of the evolution of an industry?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, there's a industry kind of, growth curve, and I would say, this industry is on it.
Uh-huh.
Maybe one of the interesting aspects of it is just how fast it got here, because some industries
Yeah.
just take a lot longer because they're less robust. But something you said really resonated with me, because I think as much as we're talking about this change from pure growth industry to competitive growth industry, there still are almost limitless opportunities, to your point.
Uh-huh.
Like, that's the other side of this, right? Like, the payoff for this isn't, just to incrementally be better positioned than one of your competitors. There's still huge upside.
Mm-hmm.
There's segment upside, to your point, services. Some of our most successful clients, we love just seeing how well they're managing their business and their evolution. They bridged into wellness. One
Uh-huh.
of our premier clients, they made that decision based on feedback from their client base 4 years ago, and half their business is now kind of non-traditional med
Oh,
spa
nice.
services, really in
Okay.
the wellness space. And so, to your
Uh-huh.
point, how the med spa industry was defined a few years ago, the boundaries around it, keep getting larger,
Uh-huh.
and the market size of those is, almost, hard to quantify because it's so large.
Mm-hmm. That's
At the
true.
same time, though, you have to be intentional in going after those opportunities. Again, it isn't
Yes.
just like, hey, I'm here, my door is open and the business
Mm-hmm.
is going to flow in. Like, that absolutely isn't the case. And when we
Right.
talk about the divide, I think the practices on the thriving side would probably say they're doing better than they've ever done before. Like, that's the
Uh-huh.
other interesting aspect. Like, they're absolutely thriving, while there's practices that are, haven't figured out how to be in that camp, that I think are really struggling and wondering about whether they made the right decision to be in this business. And that's happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's so
um
crazy. It's like the K-shaped economy is being
yep.
reflected in our
Yep.
industry, which is crazy. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I would argue, and I would love to hear what you think as well, but I think the ability to pivot in this industry and pivot quickly that's a huge difference in whether you succeed or whether you just kind of peter away into the history of the industry. I don't know how
Yeah,
you
no,
feel.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, I love just, talking to clients and understanding like what was critical to their success.
Yes.
And I think, many of the ones that have like bridged the divide already, I think inherently were smart about these things well before they needed to be, first of all. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so they were out ahead of the curve that way.
Right.
But one of the other, elements, probably, upstream of even deciding who to go after, is really listening to, the patients, the clients that you have today,
Yes.
really looking at what ones really fit what you're trying to achieve. What aspects of how you engage with them are they really happy with, what brings them back, what would they like, you to do maybe differently or more of. And
Mm-hmm.
when you do talk to the thrivers, universally, like, they're getting insights and acting on them and pivoting, to your point, just by opening their ears and getting ahead of the changes, because their patients are telling them what's changing, right?
Yes.
um, and I, again, when you think about like being great at the craft of being a med spa aesthetics wellness, expert, tied to like the business acumen side, like a big part of business acumen is knowing who you're serving, and listening to them and understanding how well you're doing, in that, right? Like, that's what business is.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
a lot of this really is kind of like basic business 101. But I think healthcare has a well-earned reputation in almost like turning its back on business as something that
Yes.
is like beneath the industry. And I
Yes.
saw that in building Cario, in spades. I mean, we served over 150,000 physicians and other providers. Absolutely, most of them had that mindset. But when you really think about it in, kind of traditional medicine, the patients are reluctant, right? The networks are
Mm-hmm.
captive. It's
Mm-hmm.
being paid by someone else. It's absolutely transactional. Like when you think about those factors, a lot of this, the business element is much less demanding, right? And just being
Yes.
an amazing healthcare professional is still the most important thing. But
Yes.
then, you get into, kind of elective wellness, which I would put aesthetics in. The
Mm-hmm.
patient's like hungry for a solution. They have almost unlimited options. They want to build a relationship. They're
Mm-hmm.
writing the check. Like in that scenario, it looks a lot more like a traditional business than a healthcare business, right?
Yeah, no,
And
it's definitely a hybrid, right? The industry, and that's what makes it so tricky. And then on top of it, you have to consider HIPAA and legal regulations and everything else. So if
yep,
you're doing everything correctly as a physician or a nurse practitioner, great. If you're doing everything correctly as a business person, that's amazing. How are you staying out of court? And do you know how to do that?
yeah,
It's not for the weak of heart, this industry.
no, no. But again, like, I always want to. There's an element to this that we want people to really pay attention to and kind of, think about how to change what they're doing. But on the flip side of that, it's because it's such an amazing opportunity, right? And it's so
Yes.
unique because, look, there's not too many, small business people that can open a single location and do 7 figures of revenue.
Yes.
And, most other segments aren't like that. So there's absolutely challenges. They exist in most businesses. Many people don't like dealing with them for sure, but it is part of this amazing upside opportunity. To the extent financial success is one of the things that's motivating people, to want to achieve growth in their practice. So
Right. Well, and I'd say that if you are not business minded, get somebody who is. That
yeah,
is, I'm currently working with Ronna Kennelly in Chicago. She's an amazing, for those of you who know her, amazing practitioner. She's a nurse practitioner and very clinically minded. And she brought me in for, my business acumen, and we respect each other, and we're working together. Do that. Like, I think it's really important. She recognizes, like, I'm never going to care about these numbers, but I
yeah.
need someone who does. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
just,
you're, I
yeah.
mean, you're the perfect example of that, right? Like you're working with someone that sees the criticality of these issues. They're self-aware enough to realize that that's not where they're going to be able to spend their time, and they're going to make an investment to bring someone in with the expertise to do that, and then that becomes like a force multiplier, right?
Yes.
Um, and
Right.
absolutely, that's a great example.
Well, and it also takes the pressure off. If you're a practitioner who's desperately trying to figure out business, even though you didn't go to school for it, it's not what your mind understands, but you're still trying. You're spending so much energy trying to solve problems that you aren't naturally inclined to solve, then you can't put that towards the things that you do really well that will help grow you.
Yeah, for sure. And I
Um,
think, yeah, I would say just one other trend we're seeing. One of the interesting aspects of the space, again, even just reflecting on 2 years within it. When I joined, I think there was a strong belief that PE companies would be, throwing a huge amount of money into the space and doing roll-ups, and that was the exit plan. And that, there's been some of that for sure. I think
mhm,
it's fair to say it didn't happen at the speed that people expected, or with the scope.
mhm.
And I think a lot of that is because this is a really unique industry, and it does get back to like the importance of the key operator to their craft, to their brand, to their relationships. And those are different than, I think the model for, the healthcare roll up is in the dental space.
Yes.
And quite frankly, like dental services don't have the same characteristics that an aesthetics business does. And I think as people try to like, take 10 or 12 different practices with different brands, different focus, different leaders and personalities, and kind of smush them together, it doesn't work really well in many cases. And I think the alternative, when you look at the data, there's definitely more multi-location practice growth that we're seeing, but it's coming through the entrepreneur on more of a de novo basis. And I think that's super exciting, right? And I think it, like situations like the one you're involved with, it allows that professionalization to take place, and then for the the entrepreneur to strive for even greater things, really by extending what they do well, their brand, how they've approached the business. And I think that's great for them as well as for patients, quite frankly, because I think they when you found something that works, being able to clone it in an adjacent market is obviously a success playbook.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating industry. The one other thing about this industry that I don't know that really very many others have is the ability to be flexible and to change and adapt. And if, as you mentioned with wellness, that's a big, or GLP-1s when that came in, IV therapy. People, they figure out a way to adapt to that if their patients need it, whether they bring in the professional to do it or they spend years figuring it out, but they see the future to that. So it's not a stagnant industry by any means, which makes it hard to roll up and kind of make the same. It's not easy, but it's interesting to see how even PE has adapted a little bit and all of that.
I mean, there are a lot of smart people and dollars there. So
yes,
certainly not suggesting there aren't successes there, but I think it's it's happening in a very different way than people would have predicted 3 or 4 years ago, right?
100%. Yes. So tell me, and I'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time. I have just a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
Tell me more about AI. I know I use it regularly. Everyone I know uses it regularly in a very probably minor way that just kind of helps us do better. What's its impact on this industry as the years go by?
Yeah, I mean, we could spend our entire time together on that, obviously. So, hard to really do it justice. I think it's fair to say it's clearly the biggest potential technology in our lifetime. I think I don't know how far back you have to go, probably more than 100 years before something with this much potential and also this much disruption has arrived, right? And we're really just in the very nascent stages of understanding that, like just in general, right? As in any part of our lives or our businesses. I think for med spas, super interesting. Almost half of our respondents reported using AI tools already, which was quite shocking. I didn't expect that. I think when we dug into that, things change so quickly, but the survey was around 6 months ago. I think a lot of them were doing chat within ChatGPT and other things, hugely valuable, but hadn't taken that next step where there's actually tools or extensions of their software. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. Just as an example, in April we launched an AI agent to engage with digital demand as an extension of the practice's staff. We've seen some great early success. We're learning a lot as well, right? Like what's the right combination? Like we kind of talk about being AI forward, but still human centered. And I think that's that's as we're building things, right? But I think that's really important to the practice as well. And, you can think of simple examples, right? Like you can probably turn your social media, approach over to AI right now. I'm sure there's practices doing it, probably not smart, right? Because you've lost the humanity of what social media is supposed to be about. People are going to see through that. It's going to fail immediately. And so like you've saved time, but you actually aren't getting any results back. At the same time, you can, have a really authentic social media profile where over time AI may be helping you, think about topics, do posting, maybe manage DMs at the first level. Like, so it becomes really an extension of what you're doing versus a replacement. And I think that's going to be the balance everywhere in life that everyone's looking for, including in this space, right? Like, not using it to devalue something inadvertently, but to actually make it, better and more effective, right?
Yeah.
And that's, we as someone supplying the industry, we're super focused on that balance. And I think it's going to be important for practices to be thoughtful about that and how they adopt it as well. And
Yes.
I think the other, apart from tools, the other place I would highlight right now, it goes back to like one of my themes in this conversation is, again, being smart around marketing strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And when I mean, I've been talking about this, for the last 2 years, but a year ago, people would ask like, hey, how do I evaluate my market? How do I think about who to go after and how to differentiate? And, it was really hard to answer that because that's
Mm-hmm.
typically required a lot of dollars and time and expertise. And it's absolute, like we've written, prompts and published content that people can see on like how to query AI on these questions, and the
Mm-hmm.
analysis is absolutely remarkable,
Mm.
right? So, like if I wanted, I live in Holiday, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake. If I want to, talk to Claude or ChatGPT to kind of understand the lay of the land relative to med spa consumers, I'm going to get data back that probably would have cost $30,000 2 years ago in a matter of
Yes.
minutes, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's really amazing and powerful. And then, thinking about then, okay, how do I apply that, and make decisions around that in my practice? It's an incredible tool to do that. And it can do it in
Yes.
a way that it's reflecting upon, your practice and how you're positioned today versus all of your competitors, looking for those niches that you highlighted before. I love that saying. And, that type of capability is, there right now, super easy, doesn't take a lot of, technical or really any technical skill, right? Just the time
Mm-hmm.
to
That's the
do it. So that,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
super exciting, right? I think
Yeah.
there's going to be, other areas that beyond where we're focused. Obviously, training and skill development. I think there's fascinating things happening there. Compliance is a perfect use case for AI. And, you kind of
Yes.
alluded to this a few times, but, I would say one of the biggest risk factors in this space because of that flexibility and the degrees of freedom to do different things is the compliance backdrop, right? And I think
Yes.
there's probably more risk than most people acknowledge, and that's not going to
Yes.
go away. And I think if there's tool sets to help people, be smart about staying compliant over time, that's going to again take the burden off of them today, or even just make it possible. Because I would say for your average smaller practice, it's probably next to impossible to really
Mm-hmm.
properly address compliance. So I think that's going to be a remarkable benefit for, practice owners, obviously their patients as well. So just, so many scenarios are emerging. And, maybe, to close this thought, it's really going to come back a lot to what we talked about with software, which is like, don't chase the shiny object, think about
Yes.
what's most important in your practice, where you feel friction or pain, and then, look at how AI might be leveraged in that context versus, like, I think you could get overwhelmed really, really quickly. And that's going to become more and more and more prevalent. When I go to, communities on Facebook again, the amount of kind of vendor spam that's there now versus
Mm-hmm.
6 months ago is shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is like, hey, AI startups, trying to use that as a
Yes.
channel. And it's actually, it's making things harder, not easier, and adding
Yes.
friction, not taking it away. And I think you just got to get good at figuring out how to tune that out and really only tune in the areas that you've pre-identified as, important to your practice. Right. And then also just be really disciplined around going to trusted sources, for trusted and credible sources to help guide you around your decisions.
That's right. I think you're absolutely right. And, even I know there are a lot of people that feel very intimidated by AI. My suggestion, and Rob, I'd love to know what you think too, but it's just give it a try. Like ask a question, and you will be amazed to see all of a sudden how it responds to you. It will unlock other questions that you may have and really start to help you get a handle on how, like the power behind how it can improve your practice.
Yeah, there's actually a professor at Wharton, a guy named Ethan Mollick, who I've been following on this topic for a while. Like that's
Uh-huh.
been his area of research for years, and a lot of his writing is about adopting AI to to various types of personas in a very practical way. And his guidance has been around just anything that you're doing, like slow down, think about it, and try to envision if there is a way to leverage AI and go out and see what's possible.
Yes.
And it's really remarkable. Like I've used that myself
Mm-hmm.
many times, and I'll give you like a completely personal example, not
Yeah.
really all that interesting, but I like planning trips. Like when we take a
Mm-hmm.
vacation, I'm always the one, everyone has like which spouse plans the trip. I'm the one that does, and
Uh-huh.
I enjoy it, and it's like I get a lot of pleasure out of that, but it's also like a giant time commitment and super
Uh-huh.
inefficient. And I was planning a trip for this fall, and I was doing it my old way, right? Starting to do like random Google searches and pulling those
Uh-huh.
breadcrumbs. And I said, well, I'm going to try AI, and I started fooling around with some different prompts, and it was super fun, definitely faster, more insightful. And I was
Uh-huh.
just sharing the itinerary with my wife, Sarah, over the weekend, and it's completely professional. It's like laid
Yeah.
out to the hour. And it's telling me like this is what you need to book now, right? These are the restaurants that are going to fill up,
Nice.
and it's just and it was really that prompt from Ethan, right? Like just in that thing, I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of going about it the way I've always done it, and hey, let's try it. And now I have a totally new, much more effective approach. And so many of the ways that I've leveraged AI, certainly in the last year, have kind of come out of that experimentation, to your point. And I think and then you just get more comfortable about, the strengths and weaknesses, the limitations, what works, what to watch out for is in
Yeah.
some of those most simple use cases. And then you can start to, maybe raise the bar around how you want to apply it, more broadly within your business. So yeah,
Yeah.
great insight there.
I love that. I love that. And your wife thinks you're brilliant, which you are, but super
Yeah,
organized
you always
too.
have to reformat the content so it looks like you wrote it right.
I would say, like, the tip is from my end, get the information, but push yourself to then decide what to do with it. That's the
Yeah.
hard thing. We can get data logged in this industry where we're getting a lot of information from our EHRs and from all of our systems. But it means nothing unless you actually say, okay, what do I do with this? How will this help me make a change, or how will this make me tighten something up? So I think just
Yeah,
taking that extra
absolutely.
step. I think there's an uh, tendency to look at it and be like, oh, that's interesting. Moving on to my next thing, as opposed to, okay, what does this mean for us? How are we going to grow using this information? That kind of thing.
Yeah, the one other actually just related to that, I read a blog post from the same guy Ethan today, and he was talking about two studies they did very much related to what you just said. The first one, they just gave ChatGPT to math students,
Oh, uh-huh.
and they're, hey, use this however you need to, and they were kind of going through their semester, and their homework was great. It looked like they were learning. There was a control group that didn't have that. And
Uh-huh.
then when the exam came, that group of students completely flubbed, and the other group outperformed them. And
Uh-huh.
then they had a concurrent study going on where the AI was really more of a tutor versus a tool.
Uh-huh.
And so it was probing like the questions and kind of raising the bar around the content and forcing them to actually learn the material. And that group of students, over the short time period that they ran the trial, ended up 9 months ahead of where they would have been.
Oh,
And I thought it
wow.
was so interesting because hey, they just used AI, but one of them was like, again, helping the human become better and smarter and learn the
Uh-huh.
content versus just doing the work for them. And
Yeah.
I think, to your point, like it's easy to plug something in, get something back, and not think twice about it. And sometimes that's okay, but I think in a lot of ways, hey, use it to, if you go back to this idea that in the context of med spas, many med spa owners have an opportunity to become, more grounded business people. We'll
Yes.
use AI to actually help you become that, not to, replace that for you. And I think,
Yes.
I think that's part of the experimentation and how you leverage it, and, being smart around like what it does well. And again, there's obviously blind spots, and being able to, see those, right. And not,
Yeah.
make bad decisions because of them.
Uh, Rob, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I'm fascinated by your brain. You have such a beautiful way of making really complex things simple and relatable. So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your time. Can you tell me where we can find the 2026 benchmarking report? Is that available for
Sure.
public consumption?
Yeah, I would, just absolutely just go to our website, so growth99.com. There's probably a banner on the homepage. I haven't looked in the last couple of days. If not, there's a resources section, and we have an amazing amount of content there. We're constantly, publishing insights and learnings, but you'll find it there. And we really do it to help us better understand the industry and what our practices are facing. But I think it's a great way for practices just to understand, as they think about what's working well for them and their challenges, how do those compare, to everyone else who's, kind of, facing the same type of market, and maybe making different decisions, pursuing things in a different way. And those are the insights that we hope will, allow people, again, be on the right side of the divide as you move forward, right? Like you said, amazing industry that hasn't changed. It's simply that the steps needed to be really successful are different than they were in the past, and you just have
Yes.
to acknowledge that and have the right mindset to to go after it with those changes now.
Love it. I love it. And I'm going to link to it in the show notes too. So
Thank you.
Rob, so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really been a pleasure spending time with you, and I look forward to chatting soon.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity, and have an awesome rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Rob.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.